Welcome back to this second part of our dynamic cables, and so in this part what we're gonna see is how to extend our setup. So I just get rid of the second pole. So what we're gonna do now is just drop it in a cloner so we can duplicate it. We want our cloner to be linear, and we don't want to move it on Y but on Z. So 650, like the initial offset we had. We can get rid of this null, and now our cable. What I'm gonna do is just add in a plane. This will be plane animation, and we're gonna set our cloner to transform animation mode fixed. And so here I'm just adding a ground plane, and we're gonna add in our plane animation. We don't want the position, we just want to offset the time offset. So here it's gonna be 80 frames, because if I let me just uncheck my plane and set the cloner back to play to just double check. So yeah, I guess 80 is okay. The whole animation takes place in 80 frames, so I'm just moving my plane, and then I just add a linear field to control my animation. Okay, so I increase my clones to 10 just to see what we are doing. I want to increase the length of the linear field too, and then I move it around so I can see how those cables are animating. So what we want here is our cables to align with each other during the animation. So here going back to my linear field and playing with the length, try to align them the best I can. So then I move my linear field, so I have to tweak it a little more. Let's see, I increase my length, so this seems to be better. I have to tweak a little more. It seems to be aligned. Okay, let's move that. Okay, it's not perfect, so a little more tweaking like that, and now it's not too bad. Okay, so if I move that, you see the animation is working. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna add some keyframes to my linear field to animate these cables. So I'm gonna add a keyframe on frame 0 like that, and on frame 100 I'm gonna move it to the right like this, and I'm gonna add a second keyframe here. So when we play this, it's not that bad. Maybe a bit. It's maybe a bit quick. Okay, so I'm just gonna hide my linear field. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some thickness to the cables. I could just simply add sweep knobs to my cables like that. Sweep and add a hand side for the profile. This doesn't work. I have to scale that down. I'm gonna scale that down. Then I have to drop that into a connect. So it's working just like that, but we're gonna have some problems, and if we zoom in, we're gonna see that when two splines meet, they are not connected. So that's not really what we want, and sometimes when we change the animation of the linear field, the interpolation in the animation of the cables is not doing well. So sometimes the cables are offset due to the interpolation in the keyframes. What we're gonna do to avoid these problems both at once is I'm gonna use a tracer object. So I'm gonna split everything here and sorry, copy that. The pole will be in its own cloner. This will be pole or photo if you want in French. Then what we need is we duplicate the first cloner, so it's already set up with the animation plane. I rename the cloner, so this will be our first cloner for the first cable. Then I duplicate that, and this is our second one, and I replace with so I just align the cloner with the cable, because once the cables are in the cloner, it's the position of the cloner that dictates the position of the clones. So I first align the cloner with the cable like that, and same for the third one. Shift C, ESR, and so yeah, now we have our cloners. I'm just moving that, and now what we need is a tracer object. So I'm going to go to mograph effect, mograph tracer. I call this tracer 1, and then I'm going back to my standard view, and what we want is I'm gonna drop my cloner inside a connect object, and then my tracer, I want it to trace my connect object, and I want it to connect elements. The connect is there because otherwise the tracer is considering each spline as a different object. Using the connect object, the tracer considers the whole cloner as only one object. So I drop my tracer into the sweep, and now we can see that we only have one spline for the cable. So now if I hit play, everything is still working, so that's good. So there's a slight offset, so I move my sweep down. This way the connect animates first, and then the tracer traces the cloner. So we have to respect the order here. So now I'm just doing the same for each cable. So this will be sweep 1. I control drag, and this will be our sweep 2, control drag, sweep 3. I'm renaming the tracers as well. And then I'm just adding more connects. One for each spline. I rename them. And now I close everything. For my tracer 2, it will be connect 2. For my tracer 3, I'm gonna use connect 3 and delete. And so now what we can do using this tracer, so everything is still working. The tracer connects everything. I'm gonna shrink down those end sides so it's not that thick. The animation is still quite light because our original cable are made of only 10 segments. What we can do with the tracer is now just selecting them. When I go to the object, I can change it to B-spline, for example. Here you can see that it's still really angular. So what I do, I go to my intermediate points and set it to adaptive. So here it's trying to keep minimum angle of 5 degrees, so it's still not that good. So we can decrease the angle, set it to 1 degree, for example, and as it's set to adaptive, you can see when we have a curve, we have more segments, and on this side there are less segments because it's less curvy. So yeah, overall the shape is nice like that. So here it's trying to keep a minimum angle of 1 degree, and that's fine. So here we have our animation. You can see here we are missing a pole. So let me just move those sweeps inside my cables. So here I'm just showing my sweeps, and I'm going to hide my connects so they don't get in the way. Then once again I need my connect to be happening before my sweeps, so we don't have no time offset. I mean, we don't have no lag. Let me add another null, drop everything under that. This will be our poles. And I'm adding an expressor tag on that null, and I'm gonna add a user data. This will be our number of poles. I'm gonna set this the interface. I'm gonna set the interface to float slider. As units we need reals and a step of 1. We don't want half poles, so I leave it to 1. For maximum, I'm gonna set it to 100, and default value will be 10. So I just drag in my poles, and I'm so the The user data are not on the right object, so I'm gonna just copy them and go back to my poles and paste them in. So now I'm gonna go to my user data and bring them in my Expresso. Then I drag in my cloners for the pole and for my first cable. Then on there I'm gonna use the count. So here's our pole count. Then I drag in my cable count. Then I just have to link my user data from here to directly to my poles. So for the cable, I'm gonna need a math node to just subtract one cable each time. So for let's say 10 poles, we're only gonna need 9 cables. So here I subtract 1, so I just connect this to the cable count. So here already it's working on my first cable, so I just have to control drag my cloner, connect, and then I just replace my other cables, so this one and the third one. So yeah, everything is working nice. So now I can just select my pole and change my number of poles over here. So it's easier than changing each cloner separately. So for example, I can set my count to 25 and still everything is working. So our linear field is not going far enough, but that's just, we can just change our keyframe and it's working. So just for this to be easier to manage, I just reduced my number to 10 again. So to push this a little further, we can add a spline wrap. So this will be easier than to place the poles. So I just so in the top view, I'm gonna just quickly draw a spline. Okay. So this will be our spline guide, and I'm just adding now the spline wrap inside our setup. So it's adjusting to the size of the setup. So I'm just gonna select my spline wrap and I'm going to align that so it's in the right direction. So here when I hit play, what you can see is the spline wrap cage is moving. It's even more obvious when we add a spline in there. So here you can see everything is jiggling around and that's not good. So the problem is the spline wrap is constantly updating depending on the shape of the setup. So to avoid that, let's first clear that spline, move forward so everything is unfolded like that, and then here what we want to do is just check this fixed bounding box and just give it some more space so everything will be inside the cage. So here what we have is the the spline wrap is seeing that we have our bend effector, so even if we don't see it, it takes it into account, but that's not an issue. So moving forward, we're gonna go back to our bounding box. So here we're gonna add some space in the X direction, so then in the right view we wanna add some length and some height, so everything is inside the cage. And then we can set that spline back, and now everything seems to work, except we can see that the tracer are not behaving like we wanted, so I'm gonna drop this into a new null and add another connect object. This should work like that, so okay, it's working fine. We just have now to maybe select the spline and move the points up so it doesn't go into the ground. Next, what we can see is here on the spline we have to change the type, because here with the type set to Akima, for example, you get these curves that we don't want in the cables. So instead of that, we want the type to be linear. And so what we have to do now is just move our points where there are poles. So between two poles, the cables will go straight from one pole to the next. So I adjust from the top view here. So yeah, this looks much better. Then I can I move my ground plane a little bit so we don't see the poles when they are folded. Okay, not too bad. So if we want now, we can set the pole numbers to something higher, and so here if we want to add some points, we can. So let's add some point here and try to move the stuff around. So what happens here is we want our spline to go the other way around. So let me hide this, and I'm selecting my spline, so it goes from blue to white, and our spline wrap goes from left to right. So I'm just selecting my spline guide again and selecting the points. Then I right click and I just set the order to reverse sequence. So now we inverted everything, and now when we add some points, let's go to the top view. And now if I want to add some points, the spline goes this way. Let me just reposition the points quickly like this. Okay, if I now wanna add some points, I just add them at the end of the spline. So yeah, I forgot, for the spline wrap, we don't want the mode to be on fit spline, because if I change my view to perspective and I move for example, this point, you can see everything is stretched out because the spline wrap is trying to fit the length of the spline. So instead of that, we are going to set it to keep length. So this avoids the stretching of the model. So now I can simply move my points. I can add some more, so yeah, this is how we can then position our spline in a really convenient way. And if for any reason we decide that it's too long and maybe we don't want all those extra poles, we just can go back to our user data here and set it back to maybe 16. So that's the setup. Let's hide the spline guide, and yeah, so everything is animated. We can just now change our speed by selecting our linear field. The linear field is what's triggering the animation. So if we take, for example, this second keyframe, we can just make it happen quicker. We also can go to our coordinates and show F-curve and change the shape of the curve. So for example, here we're gonna have something that's quicker at the beginning and then that slows down at the end. So yeah, we really have full control over the speed of the animation, and we still get this dynamic feel of the cables. So we really just have to care about the linear field here, and this is how we drive the whole animation. And we even can get crazy with that. If we want, we can add some more points to the animation curve. And so yeah, so this is the full setup. So we can drag and drop everything inside a new null. And now we can easily duplicate that, and we have a whole new setup. And we can easily change the shape of this new setup. So yeah, I hope this was interesting, and I hope to see you maybe in another video. Bye.